The words coming up, and I think you all can see them: brokenhearted, exhausted. To quote one of my favorite authors, Fannie Lou Hamer, sick and tired of being sick and tired, speechless, traumatized, as the list continues to go on.
This is reminding me of 5 years ago when I had just had my son and he was just this little nugget size, and I was home with him and I was watching the news on Eric Garner, and it was the exact same. I can't breathe. And I just remember myself physically feeling like I can't breathe because I'm looking at this little baby boy and I'm thinking about the life that he has ahead of him and how do I prepare him for that. And looking at him now, last night, he's had growth spurts since we've been quarantined with COVID and all, and he's losing some of his baby fat. And I'm seeing him become, someone's going to look at him and they're going to see him as a threat. And I was deeply afraid, angry, physically couldn't breathe all at the same time.
Just dismay that we're still in this place, that these events that, that Deb just read, that these things keep happening. What is this like if you think about being Black in America for parents? And I try to wrap my head around that, but it is hard. I can't even imagine what that's like.
I'm the father of two teenage sons right now. And the conversations that I have with them is teaching them the rules of how to engage a policeman and telling them what is the most important rule that you have to do right now. What is your job when you actually are approached by the police? Getting home safely.
Ian, do you teach them the 2 and the 4 on the driving wheel?
I actually teach them to put their hands on the dashboard so that they're very clear and that they can actually see. Not even keeping your hands on the steering wheel, because if you have your hands on the steering wheel, there could be the perception that you're going to try to take off. Turn the car off, take the keys out of the ignition, put them on the dashboard, and your hands on the dashboard. That is the experience that I teach them.
Wow.
We got to create a space where people can feel safe enough to be heard, and we got to create space where we can learn from each other and come out of it different than when we went in, because there's just a lot to learn.
The only way we can get through it is by coming together. The country's in a crisis, and we seem to be going in the other direction. So for me, it's really okay. You want to take some action. The first thing was to listen.
I feel the need to want to do something. And so, our company's a lot about action. And so I think it'd be great if we can kind of think about collectively, after, sharing thoughts of the things that we literally can do to make a difference and affect positive change.
Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. Benjamin Franklin.
I feel like things like this are very cyclical, and I feel like we go through a cycle of people posting hashtags and posting their frustration, but then for things to continue to go on and the emotional toll that brings, it just becomes very draining. And then I think about sometimes silence of certain people who may not want to have much to say, and think about the contributions that as Black people we've made to society, and that the gap that comes with that when we are talking about frustration. And what does it mean when these negative events come up? So I think that that's the biggest thing that comes up. It's just exhaustion and frustration that there are people who maybe aren't as, fed up and mad when they see that these things are going on.
What I've mostly just been thinking about is the parallels between what I'm experiencing now and what people like my grandmother has experienced. The fear has stayed the same, but the words have changed.
There was a phrase years ago called the Black tax, right? So what's the tax in addition to living life of being Black? Because it's all those other things that you just shared, and they're very real, and in the context of your grandparents and maybe even your great grandparents, it almost seems like if you put the screen on your television onto black and white, you could be watching something right out of the civil rights movement.
All of the things that have happened in years past and in the recent happenings, I think everyone has a feel of frustration or anger, mixed emotions. I think the sense of urgency is to how can we get this right? What can we do? We've exercised different ways or different things to do from years on, all the protesting and all the different things. And I have a son. He'll be 5 in a few months, and I want things to be right for him. So I guess the sense of urgency of what group of people of great minds, in any capacity, whether it be in the workplace or at home, every day, how can we get this right? And the sense of urgency, we just need to do it, and to be effective for not just Black Americans, but all minorities and everyone that feels the same pain.
But I just feel we got to become empathetic, like almost like the first thing in your head should be, what's the empathetic response? What is it that I should be putting first, to just figure out how to change the tone of the conversation and then the conversation.
Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s son posted on Twitter today one of his father's quotes that said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." Depending on what side of history you're on, people will call it a riot, people will call it a revolution.
When people who are not directly impacted are outraged, is sort of when change happens.
A lot of this has made me question if I even want to be a parent moving forward. And that's something that is a very new feeling in the last couple of years. It's a lot. It's a lot to raise children in general. And then when you think about the Black experience and all of what that means, it comes with so much more than I think people really understand.
I was thinking about how so many of the decisions that I've made or my family has made are directly tied to racism and trying to avoid it at all costs. Like, it starts with choosing what to name your children, choosing where to live, and that affecting like your job opportunities, like trying to become as perfect as possible to try to avoid all of these situations that we're talking about. Like, my mom tanked her career to work as a preschool teacher at a private school so that my sister and I could go to college, to go to a good school, so that we could hopefully sort of break out. And then we would have it made, because like once you get to a higher socioeconomic status, like racism doesn't exist anymore. But the hard thing is, like, that man that Amy Cooper called the police on went to Harvard. He has an amazing career, and it doesn't matter, because the first thing people are going to see about you is your skin. And sometimes it's hard for people to recognize racism when it's not as blatant as just like outright murder on film. But there's so many other smaller ways that racism has worked its way into just the fabric of our culture, even like being at work. I won't say like Nordstrom specifically, but just being in a professional workplace, that those are the chances for allies to step up and recognize those things. I know it's hard for people to like physically put their bodies on the line or something like that, but you don't necessarily have to like take a bullet to be able to actually like have activism as a verb, as something you do. There are so many other smaller, insidious ways that Black people are made to feel less than. And to be a good ally, step one is to recognize those and then take action to like eliminate them.
I think I want to build on Ariana's point about like microaggressions. And I've seen one piece of imagery that's kind of going viral on social media about almost like a pyramid of like the things that are overt, you know, white supremacy and whatnot, and things that are maybe more covert. And I think it's really dismantling those covert things, because as a society, you know, we get really, really frustrated, and we all like have a very overwhelming response to something that's very major and very big. But I think it goes back to those small things are the reason why those big things are happening. And I think that if we can just continue to actively recognize and dismantle what may feel very minimal, I think it kind of goes a long way in continuing to break down what has continuously been held up.
I think listening, I think being empathetic, I think trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, even if you don't totally get it. Christine started, when we started this conversation almost an hour ago, by saying, I'm not African American. I can't know what it is to be in those shoes. I can empathize. I think having a level of empathy and leading with empathy will matter and will make a big difference, to your point. I'm going to close with this, and I've shared this many times. So one of the people that I admire for a lot of the things he's done is U.S. Congressman Jim Clyburn. He is the House Majority Whip, and I had a chance to do some work with him in my prior life. One of the things he said in a speech to African-American employees that I heard was, you know, the reason I'm able as an African-American in the state of South Carolina to be effective is because if there are 5 steps between us, I am willing to take 3. Not 2.5, but 3. So if we all take the attitude of, I am willing to go the extra step to understanding, to healing, to learning, to just having more empathy, then that will advance us quite a bit.